Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about stimulating your brain for better self-awareness. What a great topic. And today we are going to talk about this topic with Shelley Hall. Shelley is an experienced clinical psychologist with an enduring interest in neuroscience. She works regularly to help adults and children cope with trauma, abuse, self-harm, and emotional regulation issues, including anger and depression. She is an extensively qualified brain working recursive therapy and well-experienced practitioner. Thanks so much for joining us today, Shelley.
Thanks so much, Lu. It's wonderful to be here.
I know it's super early where you are, so I have to say we really appreciate your time and definitely making it early in your day to join us. It's kind of like end of day here, so very different context. But I guess it's something that we can make happen thanks to the internet. So here we are. Now, I would love to get you to share a bit more about your professional journey and especially highlight why you chose this line of work, because, it's such an interesting thing. And as I told you earlier, this is my first time hearing about brain working recursive therapy. I had to look at it a few times and I'm like, what is this about? This is so interesting.
Yes, I come from a very small little town in South Africa. Along my sister, my mother, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, they're all teachers. And I sort of didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went off to university. Psychology was one of my subjects. And I just fell in love with it, especially the neuroscience part, and just decided to apply to try and get into the program. And I did. And it's just grown from strength to strength, really. And once you're qualified as a therapist, you're always trying to go on different courses to find things that suit your client's needs. But that fascination with neuroscience and realizing so much actually comes from our brain and what is there from our early childhood experiences, even from our genetics, drove me to brain working recursive therapy. I really just have thoroughly enjoyed that. I've become an international supervisor for that. And that's kind of brought me to where I was, COVID especially. They had me during lockdown write a course on how to use BWRT with children. So I've been training other professionals since COVID lockdown. Been a wonderful journey.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. What a beautiful story. And, I'm so glad to hear as well. A lot of people in our audience might be, going through life, figuring out what they are trying to do, not knowing where they end up because, this show is about well-being. So I'm pretty sure some people might relate to that. And this is really inspiring for them and for all of us, for myself too. So thank you for sharing. And we're so glad to have you here today. Now, we would love to get to know you even better. And we have a little section we called Have You Met Shelley? We're going to get to know you better through some of your favorite things. First thing first, what is a book that is your all-time favorite?
I think we have to split that between professional reading and fun reading. So if you're asking me professionally, it's going to be anything written by Daniel Siegel, The Whole Brain Child, super, super useful, not only for children, though it's aimed for working with children, but also understanding ourselves. And then if it's for fun, I want to laugh. My work is so heavy, I want to be able to laugh. So I would probably choose a Sophia Kinsella book like Confessions of a Shopaholic or The Undomesticated Goddess. They just make me laugh out loud and have a break from it.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I love Sophia Kinsella as well. And I think it's good that you sort of gave us recommendations in both areas because, like sometimes if people are tuning into the show, they might want to know something that's related to the field as well. So that's really good. Now, not sure if you're going to do this with movie, but what is a movie that you've been enjoying recently?
Well, there's not much to watch at the moment with the writer's strike. But the other night, my youngest daughter, she's 11, we watched Hello, God, It's Me, Margaret. Hubby was watching too, and he rapidly bailed. He realized this is not for him. But it's such a lovely, lovely movie to connect with your teenage daughters in particular. Thoroughly enjoyed that one.
That is a new one for me, so I'll put that on my list. Thank you. Now, I'm wondering if you are a podcast listener, and if you are, what is your favorite show?
In South Africa, we've got Mariette Strydom. She's a journalist, and she creates a fantastic podcast. She interviews different professionals. So I really enjoy hers because it's always somebody different and they're offering some other part of healing. Really, really interesting ones. Things that you'd never think of, like how to read someone's facial features to tell things about their personality, or huge variety of stuff. So really enjoy hers.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And do you have a role model? If you do, who would that person be?
He's a very well-experienced psychologist in Johannesburg, Professor Gertie Pretorius. I absolutely love Gertie, and she always helps me through thick and thin. So she's been a fantastic role model for me to see how to build a practice and how to enter into other areas of work, like the legal realm of divorce, custody, that sort of stuff.
So you get to work with her yourself.
I do. When I need some help for supervision, she's the person I call.
Yeah, amazing. It's just great to hear when you have a role model that's actually a person in your life, you know. And I think we all need people like that in our lives. So that's a mental reminder for myself to find someone like that for me as well. Finally, in this part, I would love to know if there's a course you've taken that has really inspired you.
Absolutely. I seem to be highlighting all these marvelous women today, and it's Farana Goga. She's doing an amazing course on money. She looks at our archetypes and how they relate to our behaviors with money. I think in this day and age, we're all struggling around the world. So it's a really, really fantastic one to help align yourself with your goals, to get to understand why you're struggling. Really awesome. I can't recommend it enough.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing it. And yeah, it's so good to hear that you're highlighting all these amazing women. We need to hear more of that, right? Now, today we are here to talk about stimulating your brain for better self-awareness. It's kind of like a mouthful when it comes to a topic, and our audience might start to wonder, what is this about, really? And because our show is about well-being, my first question to all my guests is always about well-being. I would love to hear from you, Shelley. What does well-being mean?
I think it's one we can really overcomplicate as well. And I think it's simply, are you well within yourself? Is how I think of it. So in general, if I am regulated physically, psychologically, emotionally, I'm going to feel well within myself. Yeah, I can experience a full range of emotions and actually cope with them. So I think that's what it means for me. It means that we can experience being angry, or we can experience feeling bored or frustrated without becoming so dysregulated that we get sick.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that. You know, it's such a simple definition that you just gave us there, but it encompasses a lot of the ideas that we have covered on this show so far. And that leads me to my next question, actually, because, you know, when we talk about well-being, we all agree that it's not the fact that you're always well, because that's not going to happen. You know, you're going to go through ups and downs in life. It's about whether you can regulate yourself, just like what you were saying earlier. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions people have when it comes to well-being. Some people think, you know, well-being means that I have to have, I need to have this well-being thing sorted out at all times. I need to be great in all fronts. And it's not like that at all. Now, I wonder from your perspective, what other misconceptions do you think people have?
It's something I keep bumping heads with in therapeutic space, to be honest. And I blame social media. People are watching stuff and they're thinking, I've got to be perfect. You know, if you're feeling a bit sad, then you are depressed and you better pop a pill. If you're feeling a little bit upset, then you've got anger management problems and you better rush off and do something about that. You know, you must feel perfect. You must look perfect. You must drive a certain car. You better have a fancy laptop, the Apple Watch, whatever it is. And it just doesn't lead to a sense of well-being. It actually leads to the opposite. people tend to be making this massive split between good emotion and bad emotion. Whereas to have that well-being, to really live a good life, we need to experience the full range of emotions. We've got to be able to regulate and to cope.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really love that you mentioned that because it's such a big deal nowadays, right? It's a materialistic world and everyone is comparing themselves to other people. And, like I have fallen into that trap myself, not saying that I haven't, because of social media, obviously. And it's really hard to regulate yourself from that perspective sometimes because you get influenced by all of these streams of information. And sometimes I feel like when it comes to conversations with uh, people in my family or acquaintances, it happens as well. Instead of talking about things that matter, people tend to talk about materialistic thing, and once again they get influenced by social media or their circles or whatever that it might be. So it goes round and round, right? And I guess that's why thinking about self-awareness is so important, because then we'll find out what truly matters to us in our well-being, just like what you're saying. And greatly enough, we're talking about well-being today. So first thing first, let's define self-awareness in the context of of well-being. And of course, if you have any anecdotes or interesting facts about self-awareness that you would like to share with our audience, that would be great.
It's a lovely topic, and it always brings back my student days of studying psychology. And there was this experiment where they took some red, I think it was red lipstick, in my head it is, and they put this red lipstick on a child's nose and they would show children a mirror. And those children who had developed self-awareness, they would touch their noses because they knew that that nose belongs to me and there's something on it. And that only starts from about 15 months. And after, it develops more and more and more. But the degree of self-awareness that we all develop is going to differ. So I kind of always think of like a young child. When a glass breaks, for example, a lot of children will say, I don't know how that happened. It wasn't me. The table broke it. And as they get a little bit older, they will be able to appreciate it was because I bumped the table and the glass broke. So that's that sort of development that we need. It can become a major, major blind spot in an adult who is unable to own up that my action of bumping the table broke the glass. So I think with adults especially, we have to also that analogy of kicking the same rock. Somebody without self-awareness, they will keep kicking that rock. And they will blame the rock for being there. Then they will say it's because somebody didn't move the rock. Then they might blame the optometrist for not testing their eyes correctly. And they never really bring it back to self. But somebody with self-awareness, the first time they're going to accept it, maybe after the second, third time, they're going to start saying, what can I do to be avoiding this rock? Is there something I should be changing because I keep doing the same thing over and over again? So self-awareness is about saying, this thing keeps happening. Is it to do with environment? Is it to do with me? What can I do to try and change it, to try and change the pattern as such?
Absolutely. I think that's a great analogy, because sometimes it's kind of hard to explain this concept to others. We know exactly what it is, right? But it's so hard to articulate into words. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, this is kind of funny. When you were describing it, like in my head, there's like a line from a song. There's lyrics from this song that I really like. It's just kind of like, it popped in my head. I have to say it. If anyone in the audience is a listener or a fan of Lau, the singer, songwriter, then you would know the song that goes, "That's who you are, crush the cars, blame the road." That's exactly an example of not having self-awareness, in my opinion. And that's so interesting. When you mentioned that, it's kind of like the exact same analogy. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's probably now easier for the everyday people to understand, because, it is something that is so simple, but sometimes we actually don't know how to articulate it into words and learn from the experience to be able to work on it. I know that for a lot of people in our audience, they might start to wonder, all right, so what does it have to do with well-being? So Shelley, how does self-awareness actually impact our well-being?
So without that self-awareness, you're going to keep making the same errors. You're going to get stuck in the same old patterns, blaming the world, becoming that really, really angry, bitter person. And of course, we know anger, bitterness, that doesn't just impact our psychological health. You're going to see your body is going to develop problems. Blood pressure problems, diabetes, all sorts of things, autoimmune, are very, very much linked to psychologically held pain, even back pain. So if we don't have self-awareness, we can't make changes, we get stuck in the same cycles, and we're going to become ill.
So it's actually more serious than people would think, right? Because I don't think anyone would go, oh, like a lack of self-awareness is going to be damaging to my physical health, actually. I wouldn't think that, actually. I would probably think, oh, yeah, it might affect, my mental health, my relationships, probably not my physical health. So that's pretty serious.
It is, absolutely. And I think we're starting to realize more and more physical health doesn't just have to do with the body. It's got so much to do with how we manage stress. And beyond that as well, our family members, our relationships. If we don't have self-awareness and we keep blaming everybody, it's easy to imagine how quickly that's going to erode our relationships.
Wow, that is definitely something to think about today. I'm a little spooked, to be honest, when you mentioned that. So okay, so this is serious than I thought it was, but it's good that we're learning about it today. And the good thing is we have you here on this podcast today to talk about it. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, brain working recursive therapy is a new thing for me, and I'm sure it's a new thing for most people in our audience. Now, as a clinical psychologist and a brain working recursive therapy practitioner, can you please clarify what it is and also how it affects, or how it's kind of, what is the relationship between BWRT and self-awareness, let's say?
Okay, well, let's start with the mouthful part, brain working recursive therapy. So that was developed by Terence Watts in the UK. And those people listening who enjoy research, go and have a look at Benjamin Libet's work. His work is really, really interesting. So basically, with other therapies, you're working with the conscious mind. I do something, I don't like what I've just done, now I must do a breathing exercise or whatever it is to try and correct it. But I keep doing the same things. Those of you who have partners, you say, next time my partner does that, I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to talk nicely. But generally, every time you find yourself doing the same thing. And that's because it gets stored in the reptilian complex. I'm touching the back of my head where the brain and spine meet. Right at the back is the reptilian complex. So in there, you've got a pattern recognition matrix. So to put it very, very simply, you have got a whole bunch of apps. Now, your brain gets these apps from your early childhood experiences, and really, really interestingly, some of them are from your family, from genetics, so way up that family tree. Some of them are actually from your genetics too. So when your brain receives data, don't know how you pronounce it in Australia, it kind of has to connect it up. It's got to find an app. So it takes it in from all of your senses and it matches it up to the app, the best fit. And a couple of seconds later, you have your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors. So it's pretty cool. And then a little bit further from that, there's no value judgment. So your brain doesn't mind that you don't like how you keep responding, because what is the brain's main job? It's survival. So if screaming at your partner has allowed you to survive, it's going to have you continue to do that, even if you don't like how it makes you feel later on down the line, because there's no value judgment. It simply has let you survive or it hasn't. It's matched or it's unmatched. And then we see sometimes we don't have that match. So if you're talking about trauma here in particular, I'm sure most people are aware of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Somebody has a traumatic experience, afterwards they keep re-experiencing it. So they keep seeing like a video playing in their head of what's happened, nightmares. That's because you don't have an app. So that information keeps bouncing around in the brain. The brain doesn't know how to match it up. It can't process it, so it keeps coming up. So I hope that kind of clarifies. I don't know if you want to ask me a few more questions around that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of new information to process. It does make sense to me what you're explaining, but I'm still trying to understand and figure out how it actually related to the self-awareness part that we were talking about earlier, because I can sort of relate it a little bit in my brain, but would love for you to clarify it a bit further for our audience.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess firstly you'd have to know that something in your life is not going right. So you would come in for therapy and you'd say, I'm so sick and tired of feeling like this all the time. And we'd need to conceptualize. We'd need to find what are the main themes. Where do you keep getting stuck? And with BWRT, we generally work with memories. So let's say it's every time, let's use a partner example, you get upset with your partner, you end up screaming like a banshee, and you don't want to do that anymore. So we take the worst memory you have of fighting with your partner, and we've got a little looping process that we prefer not to say how we do it exactly. Otherwise, your brain makes a preconceived idea and it doesn't always work as well. So we've got a looping process to then target that, and you actually get to choose exactly how you'd like to respond. It's not hypnosis. Therapist doesn't suggest. You make a new way of being, and then we install that in your brain. So the next time you're in that situation, your brain's going to open this new app that you've installed, and you will be able to change that behavior.
Right.
So it's quite amazing. And what also happens in terms of self-awareness is that, as I was saying, your brain wants you to behave in a way that allows for survival. So a lot of our stuff is quite subconscious. The brain hides it from you. It doesn't want you to change it. And this is where you'll hear psychologists talk about resistance. The brain is going to resist that change because it's allowed you to survive for so long. So it would rather keep those self-limiting things in place. And they become massive, massive self-limits. So this is where therapy becomes quite useful to try and help you identify what are the themes, what are we needing to target.
Right. That's wonderful to hear that it can actually help. It sounds like rewiring your brain and your patterns in a way.
100%. That's correct. You absolutely.
Right. Oh, that's good. I think this is such a new thing for me. I'm still processing it. I'm sure our audience would be the same, given that we don't have backgrounds in psychology at all. So at this point, we start to wonder, okay, BWRT sounds great and wonderful for you, if you want to work on your self-awareness and, rewire your not so positive patterns. But our audience might also start to wonder, do I actually need it? Because if it is a small issue, do I actually need to go to therapy? So what kind of people would you suggest BWRT to? And, how often should we seek help when it comes to this area?
I think if you go back to that thing of well-being, where your well-being no longer feels so good to you, and you're noticing there's a rock you keep tripping over, then it's time to get some professional help, because we've got all the training. And with BWRT, it's not you must lie on my couch for months and talk and figure out. It actually can resolve an issue in as little as 3 sessions, obviously depending on the severity. But even like a trauma, if you've been raped or something quite severe like that, it just often takes 1 session and we've targeted it. So, or even in your profession, if you're just not getting anywhere, you always end up coming second in a race as such, professional race, of course. It's worth saying, hang on, what is here? What is holding me back? And as I said, your brain might resist and not let you know because it's safer for you to come second all the time. There's a whole lot of subconscious stuff going on. So you come into therapy and we explore and we can sort that out pretty quickly. You're not stuck there for months and months and months.
Okay, that is really good to hear. And it's quite detailed and clear, how we can approach it. Because I think when it comes to seeking help, when it comes to therapy, especially something so niche and specific like BWRT, a lot of people might start to sort of get hesitant and they might go, is it really for me? But it sounds like it can help anyone and everyone who might feel a little stuck. And I think that's the nice thing about it. So now that we've covered, lots of the theoretical part of this, let's move on to something a bit more practical for our audience. We have this practice section where you can share practice with, our audience, and perhaps even some practical tips and strategies. Now, this means, the tips are not applied in the therapy room per se, but maybe some things that you have suggested to people that you work with. Maybe you call them clients, or whatever else words that you use, and this is something that we would love for our audience to be able to apply at home, by themselves, just kind of like test out the water, see how they go. It would help with their self-awareness, well-being. So what would be some of those practical tips and strategies you would recommend for the everyday people to try at home when it comes to self-awareness?
So firstly, when you are really upset, when something is emerging, that self-awareness, you can't do anything in that moment because your brain goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, kind of almost into a panic. So your frontal lobes, the front part of your head, is essentially offline, and you're very much in that back part. So you need to do something first to ground yourself. And I always say there's no good in the moment trying to do something. Your frontal lobes are offline. So you need to have stuff prepared ahead of time. And I think if you think of your 5 senses, try and have 5 things prepared. So having your favorite essential oil on hand that you can easily just take in some deep breaths, smelling that oil. Having a favorite photograph on your phone, you can easily open your phone, just having a look at that photograph, mindfully noticing what are the colors, what are the shapes, a favorite song, mindfully listening to the song. What instruments can I hear? Where is it going softer? Where am I feeling this in my body? Mindfully drinking your cup of coffee. So paying attention to how does that coffee feel in your mouth as it moves down your throat. Every time a thought comes, gently guiding yourself back to your chosen activity. Not going, hey, stop being so stupid. You're supposed to be concentrating now. Come on, you can't do this. Nope. Just that, I'm thinking again. Okay, let me bring myself back. So we use a sort of mindful strategy, those 5 things prepared. And sometimes it might take more than one thing. Some people even find grabbing a block of ice, sucking that ice, getting something really cold, or if it's something severe, actually going and putting yourself under that cold water shower. Just grounding yourself out of that moment of overwhelm. So once you've done that, then you can do what we call like a chain analysis. So getting that piece of paper, if you prefer doing it on your phone, kind of mapping out. Put a nice big X for the event that's just happened, and then go backwards. What was happening before this event? What was I noticing in my mind, my body? Then the event itself, what was I noticing in my mind, my body? Is there anything else coming up as I'm thinking of it now? Even if it seems silly, maybe it's linking to the time my grade 1 teacher shouted at me. Whatever is coming up, you just note it down. And then what happened directly after the event? How did I respond? What did I do? Thoughts, feelings. So you get a nice chain. And this chain then gives you a lot of information that you can use to try and change those behaviors in the future. Or, of course, to bring them to therapy so we can help you change them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think those are the main 2 for me, is to bring your brain to here and now, and then to actually look at it practically without that emotion to try and decide. So there is a little technique from Brain Working Recursive Therapy that I will teach you quickly if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what you need to do is just close your eyes.
Okay.
And just notice the feeling that you're not enjoying. Just thinking about that feeling, maybe you're feeling a bit sad today, angry, whatever it is, just noticing that feeling in your thoughts, where it sits in your body. And then I want you to think of a clock. Now, this is a working clock. Does it have little numbers or markers, the color of the face, the shape? Maybe you can imagine the ticking sound as those hands move around or as those numbers count off. So really imagining that working clock. And then I'd like you to go back to that feeling. Finding that feeling in your thoughts, your body, zooming into the absolute worst part of this feeling, zoom right into it, taking a big breath, breathe in, hold that breath and freeze it, freeze it, freeze it, freeze it, stare hard at it, make it absolutely frozen. And I want you to notice the clock has frozen too. The clock is in thick ice. It cannot tick, it cannot move. It's absolutely covered in that ice. And as you're breathing normally, thinking of your favorite color, even song, moving throughout your body from your head to your toes, just letting that flow. So when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. So this is one I use for myself before presentations. The more you use it, the better. The freeze is very, very important to stop everything in its tracks. But the more you practice it, like riding a bicycle, of course, the better you get at it. I can now just think of my favorite color and it works for me automatically.
Yeah, that was really helpful. I was kind of, I had an unpleasant emotion that emerged today, actually. And when you said, did you want to practice? I was like, yes, please. I need that. I've been working on it all day. I was like, I don't know how to get rid of this. It's so uncomfortable. But yeah, that really, really helped. Thank you.
Good. And generally lasts for 2-3 hours. We teach it to students who are nervous about exams or presentations, or professionals as well. And it lasts for a couple of hours.
That's really amazing. And that part in the podcast where you guided me through it, I felt like it was something that our audience can even replay time and time again. It's kind of like a guided meditation thing, if you will. Has really helped.
Good. I'm so glad.
Yeah, thank you. We love a practical practice section. This is actually really practical, and I'm glad that I got to practice it with you while you're here. Now, I think this is really something that everyone can try, and hopefully our audience was practicing. I mean, if you're listening while driving, I hope you were not closing your eyes. Should have done that beforehand, but yeah, well, I'm sure they didn't. So if you couldn't practice that and you would like to try it, definitely feel free to go home, go back and replay that part. I think for me personally, it really helps. So I hope it's going to help you. Now, yes, definitely. I was going to ask you if you wanted to add anything.
Yes. So those who are interested, Terence Watts, who develops BWRT, has written a book. So if you look up Terence Watts, WATTS, he's written a book, BWRT, Reboot Your Life. If I'm not mistaken, I'm suddenly doubting myself on the title. It's from Crown House Publishers. And he's got a lot of practical strategies and tips, things that you can actually do at home for yourself, similar to what we've done. It's a fantastic book to get.
Amazing. Thank you. I just got a note from our assistant video editor in the studio, Aiden, and he has a fun question for you. I'm not sure if he actually wanted me to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway because I think it's an interesting one. His question is, if ignorance is bliss, then can self-awareness bring suffering?
I think so, because again, your brain doesn't like change. So you, in that ignorance, having a wonderful time, and suddenly you start realizing what everyone is saying is possibly true, your brain is going to be like, oh my word, my survival is being threatened. And what am I going to do to survive this? How am I going to get a new app to change my response?
Definitely. I think it's a tricky thing, right? Because that is sometimes my go-to response when it comes to something that is tough. And it's easier to not deal with it. And I mean, obviously not in all situations. We're talking about self-awareness here. So when it comes to, ignorance is bliss, it's more like it helps when it's a tough situation and you don't really should pay that much attention to it, rather than when it comes to a situation where you need self-awareness and you're in the driver's seat. So it's a little bit different, I guess. But yeah, I agree with you. If we choose to not face the music, then definitely there will be suffering.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Well, there you go, Aiden. You have your answer. Okay, that was an interesting and a fun question, and I think it fits into today's topic. Now we're at the end of the podcast already, and definitely want to continue talking about this topic. But I guess, the end of the end, we have to wrap it up somehow. And we have open mic before we let you go. As I mentioned to you earlier, this is a section where you can talk about anything you're passionate about. And I know you have a topic in mind already. So take it away, Shelley.
Yeah, but I think I can already feel my finger coming up to start wagging my finger. And it's just one that a lot of us practitioners, we're really pulling our hair out over. Sorry, everybody listening, but it's a social media thing. It's becoming such a thing. You're seeing younger and younger children with their phone device, tablet things stuck in their face constantly. Or you see children trying to communicate with their parents, or people trying to communicate with one another, but someone is just so stuck on their device. And there's just no time for other. I even had a little while ago when I said to somebody, do you have many friends? And they looked at me for a little bit and then said, do you mean in the real world or do you mean in the virtual world? And I know there are so many benefits. My daughter's taught herself to ice cakes, for example, through YouTube and social media and accessing therapy. I understand there are so many benefits, but we do have to realize everything in life is going to have a consequence. It's going to have a downside. So we need to think about that. Those devices, it's giving us everything so rapidly that real life becomes boring. So I think we are going to see a big increase in children with attention deficit problems, concentration problems, needing to go on medication more and more often, because the device gives you everything so quickly. When it comes to real life, a person teaching in the classroom, that's boring. I want my stuff right now. I want it immediately. And that killing of communication. We're just not really spending time connecting with each other. We're not noticing things. So I find that's quite frightening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm really thankful that, my whole childhood, I wasn't exposed to social media. I think it was such a blessing because I now see its benefit as well as its downside. And I feel like it's not a balanced thing because, like it's just so hard to navigate our way through it. And in fact, I had a podcast recording earlier today and we were talking about the same thing. Social media, this modern world that we're living in is so challenging to navigate a lot of different things. And now that you're also talking about it, when it comes to attention span, I couldn't agree more. It was so bad to a point where, speaking of self-awareness, right? Today, when we talked about the topic, I started to think about myself and my own self-awareness and things that I need to address in my life. And I'm like, you know what? There was a time when my coping strategy was basically social media. And I didn't even realize it was a thing. Now that, I look back on it and at that time when I caught myself just spending so much time on it, I realized it was a thing. And there was a time when social media just took away all my attention from what I was supposed to be focusing on. So there was basically no flow state. And it's just really hard for me to feel connected to myself. There are a whole heaps of other issues as well. But yeah, I think when you mentioned that, I definitely agree. Like it's kind of this massive social issues that we haven't been able to address. It definitely comes from individual, yes. Like when you can be in charge of how much you use it. Notifications, you can turn that off. I've done that for myself. Just kind of being really mindful of where where your fingers are scrolling to when you are using your phone, your devices. But at the same time, it's these big companies that are benefiting from our attention span. And yeah, I guess there needs to be a longer term solution, especially when it comes to places like schools, right? Because I know nowadays it's really hard for kids to focus in school because of that. But banning phones, I don't think is going to be the solution because it's just going to make them want the phone more, right? So yeah, I think building good habits would be so much more beneficial. Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, and as we're saying, I mean, there are a lot of benefits to phones and things in schools and all the rest of it. It does give children a much bigger access. But at the same time, I think we need to build awareness that it is very much like watching a movie, what we're seeing. That we must have that self-awareness that we're not all going to look exactly as those people are on social media, or be able to do the same things that they do, because so much of that stuff is edited, as you're saying. Social media is trying to sell us things. It's trying to sell us a whole life concept, really. And it's not real. We don't live in Disney World. I think that's the issue. We're all being made to think we have to have those sort of prince and princess looks and lifestyle, and it's not real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that all starts with self-awareness, actually, speaking of today's topic. So once again, I do think that if we don't have a certain level of self-awareness, we're just going to get sucked into that. And, comparison is a real thing. It is a materialistic world right now that we're living in. There are a lot of hoops to jump through. And it's already hard to navigate through all the things that are going on in the world right now, and also to kind of find your own voice, and even just know who you are, right? Because sometimes you're so affected by all these things that you're like, I don't even know what I like. Like, I just like whatever people like. Like, oh, because everyone is doing this, I have to do it too. Really? Do you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We even notice that little girls, when they become conscious of their bodies, that the age has dropped significantly. These little girls are becoming more body conscious from a much, much younger age because of everything that they've been exposed to. I work a lot with children. I have many of them struggling because they have this whole idea in their mind of what they should look and how they should speak, even how they should dress. Their self-awareness has been so badly impacted by stuff that is totally fake and not age appropriate either.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I know we already covered the self-awareness topic, and we're kind of moving on towards the end of the podcast, but I do have to ask, because you just raised a really interesting point there. Self-awareness, while it's good, it can also be bad if we don't really, look at it in a healthy, positive light. So what you were just saying right now about, body image, that's part of self-awareness too, but it can be harmful to us if it's not, a healthy amount, or like a healthy direction. So how do we actually find this balance when it comes to self-awareness?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think everything in life we have to realize has extremes. And I suppose it's where we're drawing our self-awareness from. So if you are drawing it more from social media and people that are not real, then you have to become aware that it's possibly exactly that. It's not real. It's fake. And you're going to fall out of balance. That well-being is going to be brought down. So it's asking yourself, and perhaps even going back to what I was talking about earlier, using that sort of chain analysis. And with my self-awareness, I notice I keep going to the shops, and every time I just feel terrible and I end up buying nothing and coming home and hating myself. So I need to have a look at the chain analysis. Where have I got my expectations from as to how I should look and what sort of clothes should suit my body? Oh, look, I was scrolling through all those wonderful Shein pictures before I came on, or wherever it is, I don't know, or through Facebook, and I saw all of those images and I was drawn to a certain dress type. But looking at that, that's actually not realistic. If I look at my mom and I look at my sisters and I look at my aunts, that's more realistic. What do my body type similar? What do they look good in? So I think it's always trying to do that analysis of where has the influence come from.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And thank you for sharing that. I think now that we've opened this can of worms, we could actually go on and on talking about this. So I'm going to stop us there because it's the end of the podcast, and I honor your time. We really appreciate you being here today. It is a really interesting topic. And today I've definitely learned so many new things, especially BWRT. So thank you for sharing that. And for our audience who would like to find out more about BWRT, with what you do specifically, and a little bit more about your work, and maybe they want to work with you or collaborate with you, where should they go to find you?
So I do have a web page, so www.shelleyhall.co.za. I'm also on Facebook, the @Zululand Psychologist, one word, will bring up my Facebook page. And then Instagram, just @Shelley Hall. I'm also on LinkedIn. So I'm all the socials just under my name.
Well, Shelley, thanks again for coming on today. We have jumped through a few hoops to get here, technically speaking, especially when it comes to the internet. It's great that we can make this happen through the internet, but, it's actually challenging too. So we really appreciate your time. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much. I've really loved it. It's made me think of some new things too. It's been wonderful to share. Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.